When I arrived at the acreage that Saturday morning and found Sasha weeping in the kitchen, I knew I'd made the worst mistake of my life. She was standing in front of the sink, hands submerged in soapy water, her shoulders slumped like she was carrying the weight of the whole world. Her hair, usually so meticulously cared for, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. The dark circles under her eyes were so deep it looked like she hadn't slept in days. And she was crying silently, the way women cry when they don't even have the strength left to make a sound. Behind her, in the open-plan living room that connected to the kitchen, there were at least 8 people. There was Omar's mother, Denise, that woman who had looked at me from day one as if I were a mere obstacle in her path. His 2 sisters, Taylor and Morgan, with their shrill voices and laughter that sounded like mockery. The younger brother, Derek, with his wife and their 2 children, running wild through the house, completely out of control. All of them were sprawled on the furniture like they owned the place, demanding coffee, asking for more toast, shouting that the jelly was gone. And my daughter, my Sasha, was serving. She was serving as if she were the hired help in her own home. "Sasha, where's the sugar?" one of the sisters yelled, not even looking at her. "Sasha, these eggs are cold. Make me others," Omar's mother, Denise, ordered, using a tone that baked no argument. My daughter moved back and forth like a ghost, obeying every command, wiping every plate, enduring every disrespectful comment. And I, standing in the doorway, felt rage start to climb from the pit of my 70-year-old stomach. This was not what I had planned. This was not what I bought this home for. It had been exactly 1.5 years since Sasha left her first marriage. It was 18 years with a man who abused her in every way possible without ever laying a hand on her. He ignored her for weeks. He told her she was useless, that she was good for nothing, that she had ruined his life. When she finally found the courage to ask him for a divorce, he took everything. The house they had bought together, the savings, even the car I had gifted her when she turned 30. Sasha arrived at my house with 2 suitcases and a shattered soul. For months, I watched her walk through my living room like a zombie, unsure what to do with her life, unsure how to start over at 43. She cried every night, thinking she had lost her chance to be happy, to have a family, to have a place of her own in this world. And I, as a mother, as a woman who had fought her own battles, decided to do something. I had saved $5,000. Money I'd put away during 30 years of working as a bookkeeper. Money I'd stashed for my retirement, my final years, so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone. But when I saw my daughter like that, I knew that money had a more important purpose. I found this small acreage on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't huge, but it was beautiful. 5 acres of land with fruit trees, a 3-bedroom house, and a large kitchen with windows overlooking the garden. It cost $52,000, so I had to take out a loan for $7,000 from the bank. But I didn't care. When I saw Sasha's face the day I gave her the keys, I knew I had made the right decision. "It's mine, Mom?" she asked, her eyes welling up with tears. "Is it really mine? Yours and no one else's?" I told her, holding her tight. "A place where you can start fresh, where no one will ever make you feel less than you are." We cried together that day. We cried with happiness, with hope, with that feeling that things were finally going to get better. I imagined Sasha living there peacefully, tending her garden, maybe starting a small baking business like she'd always dreamed. I imagined her in peace. I never imagined this. I never imagined that 6 months later she would meet Omar at a grocery store, that he would be so charming at first, so attentive, so different from her ex-husband. I never imagined they would marry so quickly, barely 4 months after meeting, and I certainly never imagined he would bring this family with him, a family that had now turned my daughter's safe haven into their personal vacation compound. "Vivian, what a surprise," Denise said when she finally noticed me standing at the kitchen entrance. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were ice cold. "We didn't know you were coming today." "It's my daughter's property," I said calmly, though I was boiling inside. "I can come whenever I like," she smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who believes they have already won, who has everything under control. Of course," she said, getting up from the couch and walking toward me with the confidence of someone who feels they own the place. "Although technically it now belongs to your daughter and my son. They are married after all. What belongs to one belongs to the other." I felt my skin prickle. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. She knew exactly which buttons to push. Sasha, I called, not taking my eyes off Denise, the viper, dressed as a respectable woman. Come here, please. My daughter looked up from the sink. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and fear, as if my presence might save her, but also make things worse. I'm busy, Mom, she said, her voice cracking. I need to finish cleaning up the breakfast mess. Let someone else clean it, I said firmly. Come here now. Denise laughed. She laughed in my face as if I had told the funniest joke in the world. Oh, Vivian, don't be dramatic. Sasha is just helping with the chores. We're family, right? Families help each other out. I looked around the room. Omar's two sisters were draped over the sofa, watching TV with their feet resting on my daughter's coffee table. The brother was outside in the backyard smoking without a care. The kids had left a trail of toys and food all over the floor, and not one of them was lifting a finger to help. How long have you all been here? I asked. 2 weeks, Denise replied as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And we'll be staying all summer. Omar invited us. He said there's plenty of room, and why have a home if you're not going to share it with family? 2 weeks. My daughter had been living this hell for 2 weeks and hadn't said a word to me. And where is Omar? I asked, trying to keep my composure. Although, with every passing second, the pressure in my chest increased. He went out with his father to look at some land, Denise replied, settling back onto the sofa as if it were her personal throne. They'll be back for lunch. Speaking of which, Sasha, it's almost 11 o'clock. You should start preparing something. You know, my son doesn't like to eat late. Sasha nodded silently and started pulling parts out of the cabinet with mechanical movements like a robot programmed to obey. Seeing my daughter like this broke my heart. This was not the woman I had raised. This was not the strong woman who had survived an abusive marriage and found the courage to start over. I walked over to her and gently touched her arm. She flinched as if my touch had burned her. And then I saw something that chilled my blood. She had red marks on her wrists as if she'd been scrubbing dishes and floors for hours without a break. Her hands were cracked and swollen. Her nails, which she always kept perfect, were broken and dirty. Sasha, I need to talk to you, I said in a low voice. Alone. Why don't you sit down with us for a while, Vivian? Interrupted Taylor, the younger sister. We're watching a really good soap opera, Sasha. Can you bring your mom a coffee? I didn't come to watch TV, I replied, not even looking at her. I came to talk to my daughter. What an attitude, Morgan muttered loud enough for me to hear. Now we see where Sasha gets that from. I turned to face her. She was a woman in her mid-30s with blonde dyed hair and nails so long I wondered how she could do anything with them. She was eating grapes from a bowl, spitting the seeds directly onto my daughter's wooden coffee table. What attitude? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She shrugged, still looking at the TV. Nothing. Nothing. I'm just saying that sometimes Sasha gets a little sensitive, like doing a few chores is the end of the world. I took a deep breath 1, 2, 3 times. I had promised myself years ago that I would never lose control in front of people who weren't worth the energy, that I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me explode. But these people were testing every ounce of patience I had. Sasha, let's go outside, I said, taking my daughter's arm firmly but gently. But lunch, she started to protest. Lunch can wait. I let her out of the kitchen before anyone else could object. We walked toward the backyard, far from the eyes and ears of that family of parasites. Sasha walked with her head down, dragging her feet as if each one weighed 100 pounds. When we reached the old swing set I had installed the week after I bought the property, I made her sit down. I knelt in front of her, ignoring the pain in my 70-year-old knees, and took her destroyed hands in mine. Tell me, I said simply. Tell me everything. And then, as if someone had opened a floodgate, Sasha started to weep. Not the silent crying I had seen in the kitchen, but a deep, gut-wrenching sob. The crying of someone who had been holding everything in for far too long. I don't know how it happened, Mom. She choked out. Everything was going so well. Omar was so good to me, so different. He made me feel special, important. He never mentioned his family was like this. He never told me his mother was so controlling, so demanding, so abusive. She nodded as tears continued to fall. When we got married, they only came to visit sometimes. A Sunday here, a Saturday there. Denise always made comments, but Omar said that was just her way, that she didn't mean anything by it. I tried to get along with her, Mom. I really did. I know, baby. I know. But 3 weeks ago, Denise called Omar, saying she needed a favor. That her landlord had raised the rent on her apartment and she needed a place to stay while she found something cheaper. Omar asked me if she could come for a few days. I didn't want to, but how could I say no? It's his mother. I felt the anger surge inside me, but I remained silent, letting her speak. She arrived with 2 suitcases, Sasha continued. She said it would only be a week. But on the 3rd day, Taylor showed up with her things, saying she'd fought with her boyfriend and needed a place to stay. Then Morgan arrived saying her apartment was being remodeled. Then Derek with his wife and kids, saying they wanted to spend a few days in the country. And Omar didn't say anything. I confirmed. Sasha shook her head. He says yes to everything. If his mother asks for something, he can't refuse. He says we owe them hospitality because they're family, that this house is big enough for everyone, that I'm overreacting when I complain. Overreacting? I repeated, feeling the temperature of my blood rise. Overreacting when they're treating you like a servant in your own home. Denise says it's my obligation as the wife to take care of the family. Sasha said that this is how things are done in their family, that a good wife always puts others' needs first. Sasha wiped her tears with the back of her hand. And I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I'm the one being selfish. Maybe this is how normal families function and I just don't know because I only grew up with you. Those words hit me like a slap across the face. My daughter was doubting herself, her worth, her right to be treated with respect in her own home. All because a manipulative woman had found a way to get inside her head. Sasha, look at me, I said, cupping her face in my hands. Look me in the eyes. She slowly lifted her gaze. Her brown eyes, so much like mine, were filled with pain and confusion. None of this is normal, I said firmly. None of this is right. A family does not use you. A family does not exploit you. A family does not make you feel like a stranger in your own house. But Omar says, I don't care what Omar says. I interrupted her. This house is not Omar's. This house is yours. I put it in your name. Remember? Only your name is on the deed. I made sure of that specifically so no one could ever take it from you. When I bought the acreage, I was very clear with Attorney Miller. I told him I wanted everything only in Sasha's name. Not even I appeared as a co-owner. I had learned from my own marriage 40 years ago that a woman needs to have something that is completely hers, something no one can touch, something that gives her security and power. But we're married, Sasha said, her voice small. What's mine is his. No, I said firmly. This house is private property that you acquired before the marriage. Legally, it is only yours, and that means you decide who stays and who leaves. I saw something change in my daughter's eyes. A small spark of hope, perhaps, or maybe rebellion. I can't kick them out, Mom. She whispered. Omar would never forgive me. And is he forgiving you for being miserable? Is he forgiving you for crying in your own kitchen? Is he defending you from his family? Silence. A silence that spoke volumes. Where are you sleeping, Sasha? I asked suddenly, a question that had just crossed my mind. She lowered her gaze. On the small sofa in the living room. And your room? Denise said she needed a comfortable bed for her back. And since the master bedroom has the newest mattress, I couldn't listen anymore. I stood up from the ground with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Get up, I told Sasha, extending my hand. She looked at me, confused quickly, wiping the last tears from her cheeks. What are you going to do, Mom? I'm going to remind those people whose house this is. I walked back toward the kitchen with Sasha following my steps. I could feel her trembling behind me, probably terrified of what might happen. But I had made my decision. I had seen enough, heard enough, and I was not going to allow anyone, absolutely anyone, to treat my daughter this way. When we entered, the scene was exactly as I had left it. Denise on the couch like a queen, the sisters lounging and watching TV, the kids running and shouting unsupervised. The mess was worse than before. Juice was spilled on the floor. Crumbs were everywhere. Dirty dishes were piled up on every available surface. "Sasha, you're back," Denise said, not even looking at her. "Perfect. I need you to make me a cup of chamomile tea and make sure it's piping hot this time. The one this morning was lukewarm." I planted myself in front of the television, completely blocking the screen. All eyes turned to me. "Excuse me," Taylor said with that spoiled teenager tone. "We're watching that." "Not anymore," I replied, my voice calm but firm. I searched for the remote control, which was lying between the sofa cushions, and turned off the TV. "What do you think you're doing?" Denise rose, her face transforming into a mask of indignation. "You can't just come in here, and I can and I am," I interrupted her. "This is my daughter's house, and I think it's time we had a conversation about rules." Denise chuckled, but it was a humorless, scornful laugh. "Rules, Vivian, I think you don't understand how things work. My son is married to your daughter. That makes us family, and family doesn't need rules to visit." "Visit?" I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "That's an interesting word. A visit lasts 1 day, maybe 2, perhaps a weekend if you get along very well. But you've been here for 2 weeks. That's not a visit. That's an invasion." Taylor got up from the sofa, crossing her arms. "Look, lady, I don't know what Sasha told you, but we are not an invasion. Omar invited us. It's his house as much as hers." "No," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "It's not. This house is solely in Sasha's name. Omar has no legal right to this property, so technically he can't even invite anyone without her permission." I watched their expressions change. Confusion, surprise, and then something that looked like fear in Denise's eyes. "That can't be true," she said slowly. "Omar told us the house belonged to both of them." "Omar either lied to you or simply assumed something that isn't true." I turned to Sasha, who was standing at the kitchen entrance with wide eyes. "Sasha, tell your mother-in-law whose house this is." She swallowed, looking between her mother-in-law and me. I could see the internal battle on her face, the fear of confronting the woman who had dominated her for weeks. But then something shifted. I watched her shoulders straighten a little, her chin lift barely an inch. "It's mine," she said, her voice shaky but audible. "My mother bought it for me before I met Omar. It's only in my name." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Denise looked at both of us as if she were recalculating the entire situation. I could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a new strategy, a new way to manipulate things to her advantage. "Well," she finally said with a forced smile, "that doesn't change anything, does it? Sasha wants us here. She's so sweet, so generous, not like some other daughters-in-law I've known who are selfish and petty. She understands the value of family." She was using the oldest weapon in the book, guilt, making it seem like any objection from Sasha meant she was a bad person, a bad wife, a bad daughter-in-law. "Sasha," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on Denise. "Do you want these people here?" There was a long pause. All eyes were on my daughter. I could see her struggling with the answer. How years of conditioning from her first marriage told her she had to be nice, that she had to please everyone. That saying what she really thought would make her a horrible person. Sasha began, her voice weak. "The truth, baby," I said softly. "Only the truth." She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was stronger. "No, I do not want them here." Denise gasped as if she had been slapped. Taylor and Morgan looked at each other with expressions of shock. Even the children stopped running for a moment. "You cannot be serious," Denise said. "After everything we've done for you, after accepting you into our family, after my son saved you from being a divorced, lonely woman, and there was the true face of this woman, not the sweet, manipulative tone but pure venom." "Saved," I repeated, the anger finally finding its voice. "Your son didn't save anyone. Sasha didn't need saving. She had her own house, her own life. If anyone benefited from this marriage, it was him. How dare you? Denise took a step toward me, her eyes burning. My son is a good man. He works hard. He pays the bills for this house. What bills? I asked. The electricity, the water? Because I imagine with 8 people living here, those bills must be pretty high lately. She opened her mouth to reply, but closed it quickly. I had hit a nerve. Sasha, I said, turning to my daughter, who has been paying the utilities since they arrived. She looked down. I have. Omar says his money is tight this month because he's saving for a project. And the food, this house was full of food when I left 3 weeks ago. Now I see the pantry is almost empty. I did the grocery shopping, Sasha admitted 3 times this week. Nearly $800 in total. $800. My daughter had spent $800 feeding this family of freeloaders in 2 weeks. And have they contributed anything? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sasha shook her head. I turned back to Denise with a cold smile. So, let me see if I understand correctly. You all came here, moved into my daughter's home, have been eating her food, using her utilities, sleeping in her bed, and on top of that, you've turned her into your personal servant. And all this without paying a single dime. We are family, Denise repeated, but her voice sounded less sure now. Family doesn't charge each other. You're right, I said, nodding slowly. Family doesn't charge, but family also doesn't exploit. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't turn your home into your prison. This is ridiculous. Morgan intervened, standing up from the sofa. Mom, you don't have to listen to this. When Omar gets here, he'll put these 2 in their place. Omar won't do anything, I said with a certainty that surprised even Sasha. Because by the time Omar gets here, you won't be here anymore. The room went completely silent. Even the children had gone still, sensing the tension in the air. What did you say? Denise asked slowly, dangerously. What you heard. I replied. It is time for all of you to pack your bags and leave. Denise looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Then she let out a dry, humorless laugh full of contempt. You can't kick us out, she said, crossing her arms. This is not your house, Vivian. It belongs to your daughter and my son. And as far as I know, my son has just as much right to be here as anyone. Your son can stay if Sasha decides he can, I replied. But you are not welcome. And who is going to kick us out? Taylor asked with a sneer. You, a 70-year-old woman, please. I walked up to her slowly, looking her directly in the eyes. She was taller than me, younger. She probably thought that gave her some kind of advantage. But I had lived 70 years in this world. I had raised a daughter alone after my husband died when Sasha was only 5. I had worked in offices full of men who thought they could intimidate me. I had survived loss, betrayal, and pain that this spoiled girl couldn't even imagine. Be careful about underestimating older women, I said in a low but firm voice. We've survived too much to be afraid of people like you. Taylor took a step back, her smirk faltering. Sasha, Denise said, ignoring me completely and turning to my daughter. You're not going to allow this, are you? You're not going to let your mother come in here and cause problems in your marriage. Think about Omar. Think about how he'll feel when he finds out you kicked out his family. And there was the manipulation again, the emotional blackmail, the way to make Sasha doubt herself, to make her feel guilty for wanting peace in her own house. I watched Sasha open her mouth. Probably to give in, to apologize, to say everything was fine. But before she could speak, I intervened. Omar can feel however he wants, I said. But he will have to understand that his wife deserves respect in her own home. And if he can't understand that, then maybe he needs to ask himself what kind of man he is. You are trying to destroy their marriage, Denise accused, her voice rising in volume. That's what you're doing, isn't it? You never liked that your daughter found someone. You always wanted to keep her dependent on you. The accusation was so absurd, it almost made me laugh. I who had spent my life savings to give my daughter independence. I who had worked double shifts for years to make sure she never went without anything. I who had prayed every night for her to find someone who would truly make her happy. I won't dignify that with a response, I said simply. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave this property. 1 hour? Morgan yelled. Are you crazy? We have suitcases, boxes. The kids have toys all over the house. Then I suggest you start now instead of continuing to argue. Derek, who had been quiet all this time smoking outside, finally walked in. He was a stocky man in his 40s with a beer gut and a perpetually bored expression. What's going on here? He asked, looking between his mother and me. This woman is kicking us out, said his wife, a thin woman with a shrill voice who hadn't spoken until now. Can you believe it? She's kicking us out. Derek looked me up and down, evaluating me. I could see the contempt in his eyes, the way he assumed he could intimidate me just because he was a man, just because he was physically bigger. Ma'am, he said, his voice trying to sound threatening. I think you're a little confused. This is my brother's house, and we are my brother's guests, so you have no authority to tell us anything. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. A simple gesture, but one that made everyone tense up. What are you going to do? Denise asked suspiciously. Call the police? Don't be ridiculous. They won't do anything. We haven't committed any crime. I'm not going to call the police, I said, dialing a number I knew by heart. I'm going to call my lawyer. I watched their expressions change. The lawyer? That word has power. It has weight. It means legal consequences, documents, official things that can't be ignored or manipulated with sweet words. The phone rang twice before he answered. Vivian, what a surprise. How are you? Hello, Attorney Miller, I said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. I need you to clarify something about the deed to the acreage we bought for Sasha last year. The house is solely in her name. Correct. Her husband has no ownership rights. Correct. It is private property acquired before the marriage. It is completely in her name. Why is there a problem? There are people on the property who refuse to leave when asked to do so. Can my daughter legally demand that they vacate? Absolutely. It is her private property. If she asks someone to leave and that person refuses, that constitutes trespassing. She can call the police and they will have to escort them off. I looked at Denise as she listened to every word coming from the phone. Her face had gone pale. And if they are relatives of her husband, I asked. It doesn't matter. The law is clear. Private property means the owner decides who can be there and who can't. The fact that they are related to the husband gives them no legal rights whatsoever. Perfect. Thank you very much, Attorney Miller. I'll call you if I need anything else. I hung up the phone and put it in my pocket. The silence in the room was absolute. Did you hear that? I asked, looking at each of them. If you are not off this property in 1 hour, Sasha is going to call the police. And believe me, you do not want that to happen. Police officers are not kind when they have to remove people who are trespassing. This is unbelievable, Denise muttered. Absolutely unbelievable. Wait until Omar hears about this. Wait until he knows his own wife kicked his family to the curb. Omar is free to have his opinion, I said. But this is the reality. His family has abused Sasha's hospitality. They have turned her home into their personal hotel. They have spent her money, occupied her space, and treated her like a servant. And now that is over. We didn't do any of that, Morgan yelled. Sasha is overreacting as always. She's so dramatic. Dramatic. I repeated, feeling the temperature of my voice drop dangerously. My daughter has destroyed hands from cleaning and cooking for you. She hasn't slept in her own bed in 2 weeks because your mother appropriated it. She spent $800 on food that you all devoured without contributing a cent. And you call her dramatic. Morgan opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out because she knew it was true. They all knew it. Mom, Sasha said, her voice shaky from her position at the kitchen entrance. What's going to happen when Omar gets here? It was the question that had been floating in the air all this time. Omar, the husband, Denise's son, the man trapped in the middle of all this. That depends on him, I replied honestly. He can get angry. He can try to defend his family, or he can see this for what it really is, a necessary intervention to protect his marriage and his wife's mental health. He will take our side, Denise said with certainty. My son knows his place. He knows family comes first. His family is Sasha now, I said, looking at her directly. When he married her, she became his priority, not you her. That's what you think, Denise spat. But a son is always a son. Blood is thicker than any marriage certificate. And there was the real truth. This woman's deep belief that her son would always belong to her, that no wife could ever be more important than his mother. It was a battle Sasha could never win. Not as long as Omar remained tied to Denise's manipulations. You have 50 minutes, I said, looking at my watch. I suggest you stop talking and start packing. For a moment, no one moved. They all stood there looking at me as if they expected me to back down, to say it was just a joke, that of course they could stay. But I didn't move. I stood there planted firmly with my arms crossed and an expression that made it clear I would not change my mind. Finally, it was Derek who spoke. This is stupid. I'm going to call Omar. He pulled out his phone and dialed. We all waited in silence as the phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. He's not answering, he muttered, putting the phone away in frustration. Then I suggest you start packing and explain the situation when he finally answers, I said without compassion. Denise glared at me. If looks could kill, I'd be dead on the floor. But I had faced worse looks. I had faced bosses who yelled at me, doctors who gave me bad news, bank officials who told me I didn't qualify for loans. An angry glare from a manipulative woman was not going to make me back down. Fine, she finally said, her voice icy. We're leaving, but this is not going to stand. Omar will know exactly what happened here today. She turned to my daughter with an expression of deep disappointment. I hope you're ready for the consequences of blaming your husband and defending your mother instead of your marriage. It was her last arrow, her final attempt to plant seeds of doubt and guilt in Sasha's heart. And for a second, I saw it work. I saw my daughter's eyes fill with fear, her shoulders hunch. Sasha is not blaming anyone. I intervened before Denise could do more damage. She is defending her right to live in peace in her own house. If Omar has a problem with that, then the problem is his, not hers. Denise let out a scornful sound, and headed toward the master bedroom, the one she had occupied, as if it were her own. Taylor and Morgan followed her, mumbling loud enough for us to hear words like ungrateful and terrible. Derek stayed for a moment longer, looking at me with something that seemed between respect and resentment. You know you're going to cause a family war, right? If defending my daughter causes a war, I replied calmly. Then so be it. He shook his head and went out to the yard to gather his children's things. His wife followed him, shooting me venomous glances as she picked up toys from the floor. When we were finally alone in the living room, Sasha collapsed onto the sofa, her body trembling. I sat down next to her and held her tight just like when she was a little girl and had nightmares. Did I do the right thing, Mom? She asked, her voice broken. Or did I just destroy my marriage? My love, I said, stroking her hair. A marriage that can only survive if you agree to be mistreated is not a marriage worth saving. But I love Omar. I know. And maybe he loves you too. But love is not enough if it's not accompanied by respect. And his family doesn't respect you. And worse yet, he hasn't defended you from them. We stayed like that for several minutes, listening to the sound of suitcases being dragged, drawers opening and closing, voices arguing in distant rooms, the sound of an invasion finally being dismantled. I'm scared, Sasha admitted. I'm scared Omar will leave me, that I'll be alone again, that I failed at another marriage. Listen to me carefully, I said, taking her face in my hands so she would look me in the eyes. If Omar leaves you because you didn't allow his family to mistreat you, then he did you a favor because it would mean he was never the man you thought he was, and you deserve better than that. But I'm 43, Mom. Who will want me at this age? I already failed once. You didn't fail at anything. I interrupted her firmly. Your first husband was an abuser. That wasn't your fault. And if this marriage doesn't work out, it won't be your fault either. The fault lies with the men who don't know how to value the extraordinary women they have by their side. She leaned into my shoulder and cried. Not the silent crying from the kitchen, nor the hysterical crying in the garden. This was a cry of relief, of release, of years of holding it in silence because she had to be strong, because she had to keep the peace, because she had to be the good wife, the good daughter-in-law, the good woman. A half-hour later, we heard the sound of vehicles arriving. My heart sped up a little. Omar had arrived. Sasha immediately tensed up next to me, quickly wiping her tears. "It's okay," I said, squeezing her hand. "I'm here. You're not alone." The door opened and Omar walked in, a man of medium height with hair starting to gray at the temples. Behind him came his father, an older, quiet man who rarely said anything at family gatherings. "What is going on here?" Omar asked, looking at the suitcases piled up in the living room. "Why are they packing? Are they going on vacation or something?" Denise stormed out of the bedroom like a hurricane, her face red with fury. "Omar, thank goodness you're here. Your mother-in-law has gone crazy. She's kicking us out of the house." Omar looked at me confused. Then he looked at Sasha. "What? What is she talking about?" "Omar," Sasha began in a trembling voice. But I stood up and spoke for her. "I asked your family to leave this property because they have been abusing Sasha's hospitality for 2 weeks. "Abusing?" Omar repeated as if the word made no sense. "They are my family. I told them they could stay as long as they needed." "This is not your house to make those invitations," I said calmly but firmly. "What do you mean it's not my house?" His voice rose in volume. "I'm Sasha's husband. I live here. Of course it's my house." "Living in a house doesn't legally make it yours," I explained. "This property is solely in Sasha's name. It's private property that she acquired before marrying you. You have no ownership rights over this acreage." I watched his face change as he processed this information, which he clearly didn't know or had chosen to ignore. That doesn't matter. We're married. What's hers is mine." "Not in this case," I said, shaking my head. "And even if it were legally shared, which it is not, you still wouldn't have the right to invite people who mistreat your wife in her own home." "Mistreat?" Omar turned to his mother. "What is she saying? Did you mistreat them?" Denise put on her best innocent victim face. "Of course not, son. We have been nothing but kind to Sasha. She's overreacting as always. You know how she is." "How I am?" Sasha asked, standing up from the sofa, her voice stronger now. "How am I, Omar? Tell me." He remained silent, clearly uncomfortable being trapped between his mother and his wife. "Am I overreacting when I cry because your mother sleeps in our bed and I sleep on the sofa?" Sasha continued, her voice trembling but firm. "Am I overreacting when I spend all my money feeding your family while you save up for a project? Am I overreacting when I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to prepare breakfast for 8 people and go to bed at 11 at night after cleaning up everyone's messes?" "Sasha, you're being dramatic," Omar said. But his voice sounded less convinced. "No," Sasha said, taking a step toward him. "I'm not dramatic. I'm exhausted. I'm hurt. And I'm tired of you ignoring me when I tell you your family is hurting me." Omar opened his mouth to reply, but found no words. I watched him look at his mother, then at Sasha, then at me. He was looking for a way out, a way to resolve this without having to take sides. But that option no longer existed. "Omar," Denise said with a soft, manipulative voice, "your wife is letting her mother come here to destroy our family. Are you going to allow that? Are you going to let a stranger separate us?" "I am not a stranger," I said with an icy voice. "I am the woman who bought this house for her daughter, the woman who is protecting her daughter from abuse. And if you see that as a negative thing, then the problem is you." "No one is abusing anyone," Denise insisted. "We are family. Families live together, help each other, share space." "And what have you shared?" Sasha asked, her voice now louder, more confident. "What have you contributed to this house besides more work for me?" Silence. No one answered because there was no answer. "I'm asking you," Sasha continued, looking at each member of the Hayes family. "How much money have you put toward the food, the electricity, the water you waste in your 40-minute showers, the gas you use when you leave the stove on all morning?" "I didn't know you were keeping track," Morgan murmured with sarcasm. "I'm not keeping track," Sasha replied. "But when you spend $800 in 2 weeks on food for people who don't even say thank you, you start to notice. Omar polled. $800. Yes, Omar. $800 of my money because you said your money was tight this month. But it turns out you're not too tight to go out with your father to look at land, which probably meant going out for breakfast and a beer while I cooked for your family. I saw something crack in Omar's expression, a small fissure in his facade that everything was fine. Sasha, I didn't know you felt this way, he said, his voice softer. I told you, she replied, and now there were tears in her eyes, but there was also fire. I told you 3 times. The first time you told me not to overreact.